good morning. I'm Liz Libby. I'm one half of the team at Rising Tide Women, and I am trying to figure out how best to do this. It's not a sunny day, so I'm not outside today, so it's a little darker in here, but I think we'll manage. Hi, Lindsay. Let's get you on camera. So, we are the team at Rising Tide Women. Lindsay will be here shortly. Hey, good morning.
Hi. How are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm great. Thank you.
So,
I'm back to being in the corner.
Yeah.
We used to be a split screen.
Who knows?
Somebody put baby in the corner.
We put Lindsay in the corner.
Oh well,
Sorry.
That's fine. I'll be I'm up here in the corner. That's cool.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Facebook does it all automatically, so I don't know. So we are the team at Rising Tide Women, Lindsay and I, and we support families from conception through pregnancy, through birth, breastfeeding, the postpartum period. Basically that whole journey. We are here to support moms, birth givers, parents, partners, families. We do that with prenatal education, so birth classes, breastfeeding classes ahead of time, and birth support as doulas. Lindsay does the bulk of our births. I do scheduled cesarean births only. So Lindsay does a lot more, which is amazing. Because Lindsay, I see you out there working. You're wonderful at what you do.
So are you. Thank you for that. Thank you.
We also do postpartum doula support in home, and I am a lactation consultant, so I do our lactation support, whether that's through phone support or video chats or through home visits. So
we're very good at
we do a lot. Thank you. I've studied a lot. I also read research studies for fun, which means I am great at cocktail parties. So, so that's us. That's what we do. And we are here today to talk about unlearning. And this is, Lindsay, can you tell us a little bit about what you mean by that? Because you had posted something about this that I really liked last week.
I wish I could remember exactly what I said. It's just, usually when I do share something like that, something's been kind of nagging at me, or I've been hearing a lot of the same kind of like energy and feels in a week, and I just have to like say something and get it out there. So yeah. Really, when I think about unlearning, because I never really looked up a definition, I think it's a personal thing, and
yeah.
I feel that we look at the word like learning and birth education, and I've got to read all this stuff, and I've got to talk to people and find everything out. It kind of interrupts the process of really understanding what your body and your mind and really how others should be treating you should happen. And so for unlearning, I think what we need to do is take a lot of that information, and especially the stories that have been passed down and a lot of the scary stuff. Not that it isn't the truth and important to hear, but we need to take the scary stuff and somehow unlearn that and get good solid education as to what, let's just use birth as an example, what birth really, what its intentions are. Birth didn't start out going, I'm going to be this really scary monster that I want everybody to be afraid of. We get excited, we're gonna have our babies, or if we're pregnant, and we're excited about that, but then all of a sudden all of this this weight and heaviness of, well, how am I going to do it? And how am I actually capable of doing this? And we have to honor that there are fears. Yes. Not everybody
Yes.
is
Yeah,
going to
you
be
can't
walking
just
around
stuff
going,
them.
this is great, this is wonderful. But we have to start teaching folks that there are ways to cope and get through this so that it isn't this lonely, terrifying experience that leaves us wanting to just tell people, don't do it, or
Yeah.
get this type of medication, or don't get this type of medication. Really, we have to start learning the processes in a very loving environment, and it hopefully will make a difference.
I think so, because I do think there's this kind of idea. So I used to be a classroom teacher. That's what I did before in my pre-kid life. And so we used to talk about this empty bucket of philosophy of teaching, how we tend to think of students, and I think that pregnant folks tend to think of themselves this way, as like an empty bucket that you, the instructor, or the book, or the internet must fill with knowledge.
Right.
And in reality, like, there's a lot of stuff that we don't know just because it's not part of our like normal cultural discussion, but you're not an empty bucket. When you enter into that pregnant space, you have a lot of knowledge kind of sloshing around in there already that you've just picked up by living in the world and being a person in our culture. And so there's a lot in there already. You're not an empty bucket. So also, you're not a bucket that needs to be filled. Like you already, I'm going to venture to say, even though this is maybe not as the smartest thing as people who teach childbirth ed classes, you already have everything you need to birth your baby. You know, like it's all in there with you. And when we teach a class, it's not about let's fill you with knowledge so that you can, so that you know how to give birth. It's about like, how do we give you how do we give you some knowledge so that you can empower yourself? We can't empower you. That's not a thing we bestow on anyone. That is a thing that you have to take on yourself, but we can support you in that process. We can give you information, and we can talk about some of those things that you have picked up just by living in the world and deconstruct them a little bit. And that's really, I think, that's what we're going for today, is we're going to deconstruct some things. We're going to talk about how to counter these kind of negative images. Hi, Katie.
Hey, Katie.
That we see about birth. Yeah. Yes. So, I think that that's really important to kind of think about that empty bucket assumption that we have, how to counter that too. So,
right. And a lot of people, if I can just, while we're talking about that bucket, when people find out we're going to just say like modern day, okay, I don't know what your grandma did, and I don't know what your great grandma did, and your ancestors, okay, it was probably a little different, but the immediate thought is, what do I read, where do I go? I'm hearing the whole bucket thing, and that that's a lot of the feedback that we get is, okay, well, now I have to gather all this information. Or some folks go through their whole pregnancy, and it's not until the very end that they have time. Maybe they're done with their job, and they have some time on their hands, and it's like, okay, now I've got to read a book. Now I've got to, study. And almost
cram
is the time that I say, like, that's actually the point you need to put everything down and go for walks and all of that. So really filling the bucket, you're already mostly there when you're pregnant anyway. You got it.
And I think that's like a big part of our philosophy, like Ashley just said, is your body knows what to do, and your care provider is there to support you if you run into some kind of a hiccup, but your body knows how to do this, and I think so a lot of actually the birth education that we do is learning how to get that kind of cerebral part out of the way and let our more primal self do, complete this process.
Right.
So,
and, but we live in an age where that intuition and that trust, it isn't there. So
yeah, and we've spent our whole life knocking down that trust.
Right.
Sorry.
Can't just say no. We can't just, I wish that everybody would just say like, okay, you're right. My body knows what it's doing, but because of all of these learning of scary stories and things that are being passed down and people stopping you at the, supermarket or the farmer's market or the beach or wherever you are, and people unpacking their stories on you, that begins to fill our bucket.
Let's talk about that, because that was the thing when we were prepping for this call. That was the thing you and I talked about, right? Is that trope of like, you're standing in line at the grocery store and some random woman will come up and be like, oh, I had the most horrible birth. Like they like just notice you're pregnant and they're like, oh, honey, get the epidural or go all natural. And, that's based on their own experience. And we should not be telling women how to give birth. Like, even we're birth professionals and we don't tell women how to give birth. Like, no one should be like, oh, no, that's like a no. But I think that where it comes from is so much of us are unpacking some of our own trauma, or even if they haven't given birth, some of their shared trauma from their sisters, their, friends, their, we have this kind of collective story in our culture about birth, that it's horrible, that it's unending agony, that it's, that it's really traumatic by its very nature. And I know that there are many, many people who experience it that way. And we want to honor that. Mm-hmm. And we want to, that's one of the things that we feel really passionate about, is working to change that experience. Mm-hmm. But there is a time and a place to unpack that trauma and unload that trauma. And mm-hmm. on a pregnant woman in the grocery store is not it. No.
Right.
Yeah.
Or to suggest to that person what they need to do with their body. And we listen to a lot of folks even before they ever get pregnant for the first time. When people know what we do for a living, they're curious, they want to know more. And then, I'll talk to some people that, were years away from even thinking about becoming pregnant. And that trauma, that pressure and that stress is already there. So what are we doing to people that long before someone's even pregnant, they're worried about having a baby or already doubting themselves?
Yeah.
That's sad. Like, what if I said I was, excited to someday go to, I don't know, I'm just gonna, the Grand Canyon. I don't know.
Don't do it. You're gonna fall off the edge. Don't do it. It's horrible.
You could fall off of it. Like, okay, yeah. Sure. But so let's let people enjoy experiences even before they have them.
Yeah. And I think we talked about this in a birth class recently, how sometimes it comes from a place of like, wanting other people to avoid the pitfalls that we feel like we fell into.
Yeah.
And, like this
Yeah.
happened to me. I don't want it to happen
Right.
to you. But the reality is that like birth is not, and I think this happens with breastfeeding too, actually.
Yeah.
Every time I tell someone new that I'm a lactation consultant, I get a new
Yeah.
story about breastfeeding, and many of them are filled with that trauma and so much guilt and
Yep.
shame. And I always make it my mission to like do what I can to absolve that. Like you don't have to feel guilty,
Right.
however it went.
Right.
Um, and so I think a lot of this is applicable to, any kind of a big
Oh,
life process. But
oh, absolutely.
yeah, but also I think it's important for everyone to recognize that your journey is so different. Like each birth is so different, and there's like a million different variables that influence how it goes. So
Yep.
nobody is gonna have the same experience that you had, you know, and they're not gonna have
Even
the same setup, the same background. Yeah.
right. And even if you have more than one, if you birth more than one child, that's all going to be different. We say, or
So
even when
different.
folks say, well, my mom had this type of birth, and I want to honor that story, but that's
Yeah.
not you. And that's not, yes, you were part of that story because you were the one who was born, but you're going to have a completely different experience than
Yeah.
your mom or your sister, or anyone.
Yeah.
You're unique. You are
Yeah.
your own person, and you get to make your own decisions. People will say, we're planning a home birth, or we're planning this, or we're planning that. And even if you don't know anything about what they're talking about, or it sounds really foreign, or you're unsure of it, if you can't say something really encouraging to
If you don't
them,
have if you don't have
please
anything nice to say.
don't, or say, gosh, I don't know much about that. Can you explain? Or
Yeah.
you sound really excited about this. I'd love to learn more.
Yeah. And I think too, it's important and we had a whole video, we'll have to try to link that in the show notes about setting boundaries, holding boundaries when you're pregnant. And my favorite mantra around that is, that was their experience and this is mine.
This
But
is
I
my
think it's important to acknowledge too that it's not just individual people that perpetuate this. If you think, just take like 5 seconds to think about every birth scene you've ever seen in a movie or on TV. It's always an emergency. It's
yeah.
always scary. It's high drama because that makes good TV. And even those like baby story shows, there's always this like story arc of like things get really scary and then in the end everything is fine. And
Right.
first of all, I always wonder, is everything fine? Yes,
Yeah.
hashtag boundaries, Allison. But I always wonder, like, is everything fine? Like, how is that birth giver processing their experience? Because there's like happy music, but I'm always like, they look pretty shell shocked. But also like, yeah, like, oh, I'm worried.
I know.
But also like, do we have to always make it? Doesn't, like your birth doesn't have to make good TV. In fact, you really don't want it to make good TV.
Mm-hmm.
We really want it to be super boring TV.
Right. And that's actually, that's a fantastic point, because I am someone who had, I would say, very low key supported.
Oh, you froze.
I did.
Hi.
Hi. Can you see me?
Yes, I can see you now. Sorry about
Okay.
that.
So, no, I mean, I just was saying that, like, I had, and it's not the right term, but I mean, I would say, like, good basic births. Okay. Like, that's just to, like, really quickly, like, identify. And it's me using the terminology, so I'm okay with it. And I didn't have, like, really, really negative things happen, but I also, it's not like I was outside, amongst nature where, the birds were singing and hanging my, laundry on my clothesline, giving birth. But there's that whole spectrum, and every single birth on that spectrum is most important and most incredible. But yeah, I felt like mine were kind of like, they almost weren't, like, not worthy, but, like, important enough to share, because, they were great. They were fine. And I was encouraged and supported and treated exactly how I guess I just blindly thought that anyone should be treated. I didn't go into them. Yeah, I didn't remember. I wasn't a doula then. And
yeah,
I went into these experiences just trusting things and knowing that I was going to be listened to and respected. So, when I hear people share their stories and what they want from a birth, I'm there to listen. Those weren't my experiences. Yeah. I didn't want to have my babies at home. I didn't know enough, but I also loved hearing those stories. But it wasn't a competition. Yeah. I was comfortable.
Yeah, because it's not
doing what I was going to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's a lot of that unlearning, that, like, I think that we have some weird ideas in our culture about, like, the right way to give birth. And there isn't, it's not, you don't have to do anything. You can, pick up on the things that you like. But I also think it's important, like, an important part of unlearning some of the weird baggage that we have about birth and parenting and breastfeeding and all of this stuff, is to actually examine what those beliefs are. One of my favorite journaling activities, and we do this in our Lifeboat program, is to journal about just kind of like stream of consciousness and write for 10 minutes. And this is a prompt I've adapted from Birthing from Within. I didn't come up with it, which is a great book. But basically, you just stream of consciousness, write for 10 minutes every single thing that you believe or have heard about pregnancy, about birth, about parenting, whether with no filter, like whether you believe it's true or not, you just write it all out. And I think it can be really powerful to just let that stuff out with no filter. And, like, some of it you'll write down, and as you're reading back, you're like, that is bananas, like, but it's still in there. So I think it's really important to just pick up that stuff and examine it and decide, because then you can decide whether you want to keep carrying it or whether you want to let it go,
Right. When people are talking about what they would like from their birth, and it can be tangible things. It can be the fine details about, how you want the room to look, and anything additional that you want to bring from home or have at home and have set up, or wherever you're planning on doing this. But some folks, that those details aren't anything that they really think about or feel they need. Yeah. And that's okay too. I feel like, we're anxious to tell our story after, and we want it to be filled with, this was
Those
going on,
little tweet
and like
details.
glorify it. And sometimes it's like, no, my baby was born, and you know, that was that.
Yeah.
And that,
It wasn't Pinterest
so,
perfect.
what's that?
It wasn't Pinterest perfect.
Yeah, right. And you know, I worry about that sometimes too, because you know, what I would love to hear people say is, I really just, I want to be listened to. I want to be
Yeah.
respected. I want to make decisions as a team.
Yeah.
I want to be encouraged. I want to be respected. I want to have some laughs maybe.
Yeah.
You know, those are the things that I initially I hope for, and even if I don't hear that right away,
Yeah.
hopefully we'll get to that point.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's important too, that, as we're thinking about what we want out of this experience, you know, those visual details can be important. And we're
Oh,
not, it's not a knock on anyone. If that's what's important to you, great.
yeah.
We want to support that. But I think sometimes we get so caught up in those visual details and making it look perfect. And I think this holds true for parenting
Yes.
as well, like, but the reality is like birth is a messy, gritty process, and not messy just, in a gross way, but like, but emotionally,
Right.
like I had a really amazing second birth experience. And, it wasn't fun while I was in it. I remember being in it and being like, holy crap, this is so hard. But it's like, after looking back, I feel triumphant. I feel like like I did that and it was messy. I had to like grit my teeth and get through it,
Yep.
but it was
Yeah.
powerful. There's so much power that moves through you.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Thanks, Ashley.
And you know, however you birth and however you parent, um, it is gritty, and not in a you can't do it, it's so impossible way. And again, that's what we're passing on to people, like, oh, you know, it's so life changing, like be prepared never to sleep again, and you
Yeah.
know, be prepared to um never be at ease with your body again, and like I
But
that
it's
I
so
just
black and
I
white.
I don't subscribe to that. I don't,
No.
you know, unlearn that. If we teach you anything right now in
Yeah.
this video, like just just unlearn that right away. Like
Yeah.
don't like lock that into your brains, because
Yeah.
like what? Like I don't get that.
Yeah.
You are awesome, and yes, parenting
Yes, you
changes
are.
you, and not always for the best. Like believe me, we all have days where we're like,
I had a meltdown this week. I
I
just want to
don't
be real
know.
and share. I had a meltdown this week where I, in tears, told my husband that I hated parenting. Like, just to be real, just so you think that we don't have our stuff together. And like, it's fine. We got through it. But
Right.
like, I just want everybody to know that like everybody has those moments. Everybody.
And if you don't like, we I'd love to hear from you. You know,
I want to shake your hand.
I or like I'm yeah, not sure, like, huh?
Or,
But but it's okay. And again, people, you know, Liz, in one of our classes, and what's great, if I can say, what's great about our classes is that these are private. So we're in your home.
yeah.
We are sitting wherever you're most comfortable with you with our
Making you
presentation, but like,
snacks.
we're hanging
Good.
out. We're talking about all of this just like right now,
Yeah.
but in person. You know, get it. If you have a group of friends and you're all expecting around the same time, get together. Let's talk about these things as a group where you're comfortable. And you can really let loose about your feelings, because a lot of the times, you know, we're in these groups and we're just kind of like, oh yeah, whoa, you know, But one thing that Liz said recently in a class was that, you know, people want to share their trauma, and there is nothing wrong. We need people to have a place to unpack that and unload,
Yeah.
because there are some really traumatic stories out there, and
Yeah.
nobody wants anything bad to happen to the next person. Heck no. But there need to be, we need to create more places and more safe places to unpack that. Because people who haven't even given birth, they're starting to carry that load. And that's now transferring down to their cells, a cellular level. It's that's all being loaded into their bodies. And that's any traumatic experience for anyone when we say, oh God, you know, it was horrible. But that's what people do. They want to share their story. And I think that's great. But learning about birth in a really positive environment where you can share your fears, and we deal with that right away. Let's tackle that, you know, pause presentation. This needs attention.
And let's talk it through. Like, okay, well, what if that did happen? How would we handle it?
Right.
And how likely is it that that's going to happen?
Right. What can we do to help you know that you will be supported no matter what, that you will have someone no matter what? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we need to really get out of that, you know, black and white thinking about birth, and about parenting in general. It's like, I think, oh, am I frozen? You're frozen. I'm going to keep going. But I think we end up talking about like, oh, it's going to be horrible or it's going to be amazing and you're going to be blissed out. And the reality is, like, neither of those things are true. You know, like, the reality is more nuanced and so much more awesome than that. You know, so I think that we need to really think about what we're telling people, how we think about it. So, like, let's process some of this stuff and let's be honest and let's be real about what it actually is like, you know, both the good and the bad. You know, I think that we sometimes present this kind of polished, Instagram worthy image, and sometimes not intentionally either. Sometimes it's just that we just share the good things. But it's also really important to talk about the things that are hard, and not in a way that's going to be like, oh, your life is going to be unending drudgery from now on. Hi. Are you back? So, you know, I think it's just important to, you know, to kind of honor the gray areas where we all live, and to really look at, you know, how we're processing that, and can we create some spaces where we can process that trauma out loud and process our stories, whether they're traumatic or not. Hi, Lindsay. It's not giving me the option to put you on screen again. Let's see if I can. Oh, there it goes. Okay. But I think it's really important to create those spaces so that we're not trying to process our stuff verbally.